The autumn sky over Millbrook Valley had turned the color of rust and smoke long before anyone noticed the flames. It was Marcus Chen who first saw the orange glow bleeding through the cracks of the old Morrison barn, that weathered structure that had stood at the edge of town for longer than anyone could remember. Marcus had been driving home from his shift at the veterinary clinic, his truck rumbling down the narrow country road when he caught the acrid smell of burning wood. His hands tightened on the steering wheel as his eyes searched the darkening landscape. Then he saw it, the barn, wreathed in flames that licked hungrily at the evening air. His first instinct was to call 911. His second was to pull over. His third, the one that would change his life forever, was to notice the figure stumbling near the barn entrance, calling out a name that was lost in the roar of the fire. "Jasper, Jasper, where are you?" Marcus recognized the voice before he recognized the man. Ethan Morrison, the quiet rancher who'd inherited this property 2 years ago, the man Marcus had exchanged perhaps a dozen words within all that time. Ethan's face was streaked with soot, his flannel shirt torn, and there was a wild desperation in his eyes that made Marcus's chest tighten. "There's someone inside," Marcus shouted, already running toward him. "My dog," Ethan gasped, coughing. "He was sleeping in the loft. I got the horses out, but Jasper, I can't find him." The words were barely out of his mouth before Ethan turned back toward the barn. Marcus didn't think, he didn't weigh the options or calculate the risk. He simply moved, his body acting on instincts he didn't know he possessed. He caught Ethan's arm, stopping him. "I'll go," Marcus said. "I'm smaller, faster. Where did you last see him?" "The west loft, but you can't." Marcus was already moving. The heat hit him like a physical wall as he approached the barn entrance, and somewhere in the distance he heard Ethan shouting his name. The smoke was thick and black, stinging his eyes and filling his lungs with each breath. He pulled his shirt up over his nose and mouth, crouching low as he'd seen in movies, praying that Hollywood had gotten at least that part right. The interior of the barn was a hellscape. Flames crawled up the support beams and the air itself seemed to shimmer with heat. Through the smoke, Marcus could make out the ladder to the loft. It was still intact, though fire was beginning to creep along its base. "Jasper," he called out, his voice hoarse. "Here, boy, Jasper." A bark, faint, frightened but unmistakable. Marcus's heart leaped. He scrambled up the ladder, splinters digging into his palms. The loft was less consumed by the flames, but smoke pooled thick at the ceiling. He dropped to his hands and knees, crawling forward. There, in the corner pressed against the wall, was a golden retriever, his eyes wide with fear, his body trembling. Marcus had seen enough terrified animals in his work to recognize shock when he saw it. "It's okay, buddy," Marcus murmured, reaching out slowly. "I've got you, we're getting out of here." Jasper didn't resist as Marcus gathered him into his arms. The dog was heavy, easily 70 pounds, but adrenaline made Marcus strong. He staggered to his feet, turning back toward the ladder. That's when he heard it, a groan of wood, a sound like the earth itself sighing. He looked up just in time to see one of the main support beams beginning to give way, burning embers raining down like hellish snow. Marcus ran. He didn't remember climbing down the ladder, didn't remember the exact moment his feet hit the barn floor. He only remembered running, Jasper clutched against his chest, the heat searing his back, the smoke burning his lungs, and the terrible, certain knowledge that he wasn't going to make it. Then hands were grabbing him, pulling him forward with desperate strength. Ethan had come into the barn after him, ignoring every screaming instinct of self-preservation, and was dragging them both toward the exit. They burst through the barn doors just as the structure behind them gave a final, shuddering groan. Marcus and Ethan stumbled forward, falling to their knees on the grass as behind them, with a sound like thunder, the barn collapsed in on itself, sending a tower of sparks spiraling into the darkening sky. For a long moment, neither of them moved. They knelt there on the ground, gasping for air, Marcus still holding Jasper, Ethan's hand still gripping Marcus's shoulder. In the distance, sirens wailed, growing closer. "You're insane," Ethan finally said, his voice rough with smoke and something else, something that made Marcus's skin prickle. "You could have died." Marcus turned to look at him. In the flickering light of the burning barn, Ethan Morrison was both terrifying and beautiful, his face smudged with ash, his green eyes bright with unshed tears, his jaw tight with an emotion Marcus couldn't quite name. "So could you," Marcus replied. "You came in after me. You went in after my dog." "He's a good dog," Marcus said, and then, inexplicably, impossibly, they were both laughing, great gasping laughs that hurt their smoke-damaged lungs but felt necessary, vital, like proof that they were alive. Jasper, sensing the shift in mood, raised his head and licked Marcus's face, tail thumping weakly against the ground. The fire trucks arrived and the paramedics, and suddenly there were emergency blankets and oxygen masks and a dozen questions Marcus couldn't quite focus on answering. Through it all, he found his gaze returning to Ethan Morrison, who sat a few feet away receiving his own medical attention, but whose eyes kept finding Marcus's in the chaos, as if to confirm he was really there, really solid, really alive. Neither of them knew it then, but in that moment, kneeling in the grass, surrounded by smoke and sirens, their hearts pounding with the aftermath of death narrowly avoided, something had been forged between them that was as permanent and unbreakable as the steel beams that had once held up that barn. The Millbrook Valley Community Hospital was small, just 20 beds and a handful of exhausted-looking staff, but it was enough for what Marcus and Ethan needed: a thorough examination, treatment for smoke inhalation, and bandages for the burns that neither of them had noticed in the chaos. Marcus sat on an examination table, his shirt discarded, while a nurse named Patricia cleaned and dressed the burns on his shoulders and back. The adrenaline was wearing off, and with it came the pain, a dull, throbbing ache that radiated across his skin. "You're lucky," Patricia said, not unkindly. "Second-degree burns, but not extensive. You'll heal fine if you keep them clean and dressed, though I have to say, running into a burning building isn't what I'd call lucky behavior." "How's the other guy?" Marcus asked. "Ethan Morrison." "Similar situation, maybe a bit worse for wear since he was in there longer initially, getting the horses out." Patricia secured the last bandage with practiced efficiency. "You two are either very brave or very foolish. I haven't decided which." "Can it be both?" She smiled despite herself. "I suppose it can." She stepped back, surveying her work. "The doctor will want to keep you overnight for observation. Smoke inhalation can have delayed effects. Don't argue," she added, seeing Marcus open his mouth. "You're staying, and that's final." Marcus was too tired to fight. He nodded, accepting the hospital gown she handed him, and was shown to a room on the second floor. It was small and plain, with pale blue walls and a window that looked out over the parking lot, but it felt like luxury after what he'd just been through. He just settled into the bed when there was a knock at the door. It opened before he could respond, and Ethan Morrison stepped inside. Ethan looked different in the harsh fluorescent hospital lighting. Without the smoke and flames and desperate emergency, Marcus could actually see him clearly for the first time. He was tall, maybe 6'2", with broad shoulders and the kind of weathered, sun-worn skin that came from years of outdoor work. His hair was dark brown, slightly too long, curling at the collar of the hospital gown someone had clearly forced him into. His eyes were green, a deep forest green that Marcus had noticed even through the smoke, and right now, they were fixed on Marcus with an intensity that made his breath catch. "Hey," Ethan said softly, "mind if I come in?" "It's your hospital room as much as mine," Marcus replied, then immediately felt stupid for saying it. But Ethan smiled, a small, genuine thing that transformed his face. "They said you're okay, I wanted to make sure." "I'm fine, couple of burns, some smoke in my lungs, but I'll live." Marcus shifted, making room as if Ethan might sit on the bed. Though there was a perfectly good chair by the window. "How's Jasper?" "They took him to the emergency vet. Your boss, actually Dr. Sullivan, she came in as soon as she heard, said Jasper's going to be fine, scared, dehydrated, but fine." Ethan's voice cracked slightly on the last word and he cleared his throat. "Thanks to you. I just did what anyone would do." "No," Ethan said firmly, finally moving to sit in the chair, though he leaned forward, elbows on his knees, closing the distance between them. "Not anyone. Most people would have called 911 and waited. You ran into a burning building for a dog you'd never met." "I'm a vet tech," Marcus said with a shrug that made him wince as his burned shoulders protested. "Animals are kind of my thing." Still, Ethan held his gaze. "Thank you, I mean it, Jasper, he's all I have if I'd lost him." The vulnerability in Ethan's voice did something strange to Marcus's chest. He'd seen this man maybe a dozen times around town, at the feed store, at the grocery store, once at the diner, and they'd never exchanged more than polite nods. Ethan Morrison had a reputation for being quiet, solitary, keeping to himself on his ranch at the edge of town. But now in this sterile hospital room, Marcus was seeing something else, the raw, unguarded emotion of someone who'd nearly lost something precious. You don't have to thank me, Marcus said quietly. I'm just glad we both made it out. Because you came back for me, Ethan's jaw tightened. I saw you in there carrying Jasper. I saw that beam starting to fall and I moved, I didn't think. So we're both idiots who don't think before running into burning buildings. That surprised a laugh out of Ethan, short and rough but real. I guess we are. They sat in comfortable silence for a moment, the sounds of the hospital filtering through the door, distant voices, the squeak of shoes on linoleum, the periodic beep of monitors. Outside the window, the sky had gone fully dark, and Marcus realized with a start that he had no idea what time it was. What happened, he asked suddenly. With the barn, how did it start? Ethan's expression darkened. Electrical, they think. The wiring in that barn was ancient. I'd been meaning to get it updated, but, he shrugged helplessly. Money's tight. The ranch hasn't exactly been profitable since I took it over from my uncle. I kept putting it off and now, he gestured vaguely, encompassing the catastrophe of the evening. Now the barn's gone. I'm sorry. Don't be, it's my own fault for being negligent, and honestly, Ethan looked up, meeting Marcus's eyes again. I don't care about the barn. Barns can be rebuilt. Jasper can't be replaced, neither can you. The words hung in the air between them, weighted with something Marcus didn't quite know how to name. His heart did a strange flutter in his chest. Well, Marcus said, aiming for lightness and not quite achieving it, I'd like to think I'm one of a kind, but there's probably at least a few other Asian American vet techs with questionable decision-making skills out there. Ethan's smile returned, softer this time. I doubt any of them are quite like you. Before Marcus could formulate a response to that, before he could even begin to unpack the warmth that bloomed in his chest at those words, there was another knock at the door, and Dr. Sullivan entered, her gray hair pulled back in a neat bun, her expression somewhere between concerned and exasperated. Marcus Chen, she said, hands on her hips. When I hired you, I don't recall firefighter being in your job description. Hi, Dr. Sullivan, Marcus said weakly. She softened immediately, crossing to his bedside and checking him over with the practiced eye of someone who'd been caring for living creatures for 4 decades. You gave me quite a scare when I got the call. Are you really all right? I'm fine. They're keeping me overnight for observation, but it's nothing serious. Good. She squeezed his hand gently, then turned to Ethan. Mr. Morrison, Jasper is doing well. We've got him on oxygen and fluids, but he's stable. You can see him tomorrow once you've both been discharged. Thank you, Ethan said, and the relief in his voice was palpable, for everything. Dr. Sullivan nodded, then gave them both a knowing look that Marcus didn't quite understand. Well, I'll leave you two to rest. Marcus, don't think this gets you out of your shift Thursday. We have a full schedule. Wouldn't dream of it, Marcus promised. After she left, Ethan stood slowly as if reluctant to go. I should let you sleep, you've had one hell of a night. So have you, Marcus pointed out. Yeah. Ethan moved toward the door, then paused, his hand on the frame. He turned back, and in his eyes was that same intensity from before, that same unreadable emotion. Marcus, if you need anything, and I mean anything, while you're recovering, just let me know. It's the least I can do. I'll be fine, really. I know, but the offer stands. Ethan hesitated, seeming to wrestle with something internally. Then, maybe when we're both out of here I could buy you dinner as a thank you. Marcus's pulse quickened. You don't have to. I want to, Ethan interrupted, and there was something in the way he said it, something in the way he was looking at Marcus, that made it clear this was about more than gratitude. Marcus found himself nodding before he'd consciously decided to. Okay, yeah, dinner sounds good. Ethan's smile was like sunrise, slow and warming. Good, I'll see you tomorrow then. Tomorrow, Marcus agreed. After Ethan left, Marcus lay back in the hospital bed, staring at the ceiling, his mind racing. His shoulders ached, his lungs burned with each breath, and he was pretty sure he'd never been more exhausted in his life. But underneath all of that, there was something else, a flutter of anticipation, a spark of something that felt dangerously like hope. He'd run into a burning building tonight. He'd risked his life for a dog he'd never met, and in doing so, he'd somehow forged a connection with a man he barely knew. A man with green eyes and a hesitant smile and a voice that made something in Marcus's chest go warm and soft. As Marcus drifted off to sleep, his last thought was that maybe, just maybe, some burns were worth the scars they left behind. By the time Marcus was discharged the next morning, the entire town of Millbrook Valley had heard about the fire. News traveled fast in a community of barely 3,000 people, especially when it involved one of their own running into a burning barn like some kind of action hero. Marcus's phone had died sometime during the night, and when he finally got home and plugged it in, it immediately began buzzing with a barrage of texts and missed calls. His mother had called 6 times. His best friend Lee had sent approximately 40 texts ranging from "OMG, are you okay?" to "You absolute idiot, what were you thinking?" to "Also that's really hot in a stupid kind of way." Even his ex-boyfriend Tyler had texted, which was surprising given they hadn't spoken in almost a year. Marcus ignored most of it, taking a long, hot shower that made his burns scream but also felt absolutely necessary to wash away the lingering smell of smoke. He'd just gotten dressed in the softest t-shirt he owned, anything else felt like torture against his bandaged shoulders, when there was a knock at his apartment door. He opened it to find Lee standing there with a casserole dish in her hands and murder in her eyes. "Marcus Chen, you beautiful idiot," she said, pushing past him into the apartment. "I brought lasagna and a lecture, sit down." Marcus sat. He'd learned years ago not to argue with Lee Park when she was in full mother hen mode, despite the fact that they were the same age and she stood barely 5 feet tall. She set the lasagna on his kitchen counter, then turned to face him, hands on her hips. "Are you okay?" she demanded. "And I want the real answer, not the 'I'm fine' answer you give everyone." "I'm sore," Marcus admitted. "And my lungs feel like I've been breathing through a screen door, but I'm okay, really. The doctors said everything should heal fine." Lee's expression softened slightly. She crossed to the couch and sat beside him, careful not to jostle his shoulders. "You scared me when I heard what you did." "I know, I'm sorry." "Don't be sorry, just, maybe don't make a habit of running into burning buildings." "I'll try not to," Marcus promised with a small smile. Lee studied him for a moment, her dark eyes sharp. She'd been his best friend since they'd met in community college 10 years ago, and she had an uncanny ability to read him like a book. "So," she said slowly, "want to tell me about Ethan Morrison?" Marcus felt heat rise to his cheeks that had nothing to do with his burns. "What about him?" "Oh, don't give me that innocent look. The entire town is talking about how he went back into the barn after you, how you two stumbled out together like something from a romance novel, how he wouldn't leave your side at the hospital until they made him go to his own room." "Who told you all that?" "Patricia's daughter works at the library with me. Small town, Marcus, you know how it is." Lee leaned forward, her expression shifting from teasing to genuinely curious. "But seriously, what's going on there?" Marcus hesitated. What was going on? He barely knew Ethan Morrison. They'd shared a traumatic experience, sure, and there had been that moment in the hospital, that charged conversation, that invitation to dinner. But it didn't mean anything, did it? Except Marcus kept thinking about the way Ethan had looked at him, the intensity in those green eyes, the way his voice had cracked when talking about Jasper, the way he'd smiled, slow and genuine, when Marcus had agreed to dinner. "I don't know," Marcus finally said. "He asked me to dinner as a thank you." Lee's eyebrows rose. "A dinner thank you, that's very date-like for a thank you." "It's not a date." "Did he say it's not a date?" "Well, no, but..." "Then it's a date?" Lee grinned, looking entirely too pleased with herself. "Marcus, you know he's single, right? Has been since he moved here. I've never even seen him talk to anyone for more than 5 minutes, and now he's asking you to dinner." "Maybe he's just grateful I saved his dog." "Or maybe," Lee said, poking him gently in the arm, "he's interested. When's the last time you went on an actual date?" Marcus thought about it. "Tyler. Tyler was a year ago and he was terrible. You deserve better." "I barely know Ethan." "So get to know him, that's what dates are for." Lee stood, heading back to the kitchen. "I'm going to heat you up some of this lasagna and you're going to eat it and then you're going to rest. And tomorrow or whenever this dinner is happening, you're going to go and you're going to have a good time, got it?" "You're very bossy." "It's why you love me." Marcus couldn't argue with that. He accepted the plate of lasagna she brought him and ate while Lee rattled on about the latest drama at the library, something involving the book club and a heated disagreement over whether a particular romance novel was empowering or problematic. Marcus let her words wash over him, grateful for the normalcy of it, the reminder that life continued even after you did something crazy like run into a burning building. After Lee left, Marcus tried to rest like she'd ordered, but his mind wouldn't settle. He kept replaying the events of the previous night, the heat of the flames, the weight of Jasper in his arms, Ethan's hand on his shoulder pulling him to safety. The look in Ethan's eyes in the hospital room. His phone buzzed with a text, unknown number. "Hey, it's Ethan. Dr. Sullivan gave me your number. Hope that's okay. Just wanted to let you know Jasper's home and doing well, and to check if you're still okay with dinner. No pressure if you'd rather rest." Marcus stared at the message for a long moment, his thumb hovering over the keyboard. Then, before he could second-guess himself, he typed back, "Glad Jasper's okay, and yes to dinner. When were you thinking?" The response came almost immediately. "Friday night, I know a place about 20 minutes outside town, nothing fancy but the food's good. I can pick you up around 7. Marcus's heart did that strange flutter again. "Sounds perfect, see you then." He set the phone down, then picked it up again, saving Ethan's number under his contacts. Then he flopped back on the couch, wincing as his shoulders protested, and stared at the ceiling with what he knew was a ridiculous smile on his face. Lee was right, it was definitely a date. Friday arrived faster than Marcus expected, bringing with it a level of anxiety he hadn't felt since his first date with Tyler back in college. He spent the day at the clinic, fielding questions from concerned pet owners who'd heard about his heroics, Dr. Sullivan had apparently told everyone, and trying not to overthink the evening ahead. "You're fidgeting," Dr. Sullivan observed around 3 o'clock, catching him rearranging the same supply shelf for the third time. "I'm organizing." "You're nervous about tonight." Marcus sighed. There was no point in lying to her. Is it that obvious? "Only to someone who's known you for 5 years, she smiled kindly. "Marcus, you saved that man's dog, you literally ran through fire for him. I think you've already made a good impression." "That's different, that was just instinct, adrenaline. This is," he gestured helplessly, "a date. Maybe. I don't even know if it's a date." "It's a date," Dr. Sullivan said with the confidence of someone who'd been married for 35 years and had apparently become an expert on such matters. "And you're going to be fine, just be yourself." "What if myself isn't enough?" She gave him a look that was half fond, half exasperated. "Marcus Chen, you ran into a burning building to save a dog. If that's not enough, then Ethan Morrison is an idiot and you're better off without him. Now go home, you're done for the day, go shower, put on something nice and try to relax." Marcus did as he was told, though relaxing proved impossible. He showered for the second time that day, taking care with the healing burns on his shoulders. They were already looking better, the angry red fading to pink, though they still ached if he moved wrong. He spent an embarrassing amount of time staring at his closet, trying to decide what counted as appropriate for a maybe date at a casual restaurant 20 minutes outside of town. He finally settled on dark jeans and a soft blue button-down that Lee had bought him for his birthday, claiming it made his eyes look good. He thought she was being ridiculous at the time, but now, standing in front of his bathroom mirror, he had to admit the color did work. His black hair was getting too long, falling into his eyes, but there wasn't time to do anything about it now. He pushed it back and hoped for the best. At 6:55, he was packing his living room, double-checking that he had his wallet, his phone, his keys. At 7:00 exactly, there was a knock at his door. Marcus took a breath, steadied himself, and opened it. Ethan stood on his doorstep looking different. Marcus had only ever seen him in work clothes, flannel and denim and boots covered in dust. But tonight, Ethan wore dark jeans and a fitted olive green Henley that made his eyes look even more vivid. His hair was still slightly too long, but it was clean and combed back from his face, and he'd shaved, revealing a strong jawline that Marcus had never really noticed before. "Hi," Ethan said, and there was something almost shy in his smile. "Hi," Marcus replied, feeling suddenly tongue-tied. "You look good." "Thanks, so do you." Marcus grabbed his jacket from the hook by the door, wincing slightly as he pulled it on over his shoulders. Ethan's expression immediately shifted to concern. "How are your burns? Should we postpone this if you're in pain?" "No, I'm fine really, they're healing well." Ethan didn't look entirely convinced, but he nodded. "Okay, but if you need to cut the evening short, just say the word, no judgment." They walked to Ethan's truck, a old Ford that had seen better days but was impeccably clean inside. Country music played softly from the radio, and as they pulled out of town, the conversation came surprisingly easy. They talked about Jasper's recovery complete, the vet had declared him in perfect health, about the barn insurance would cover most of the rebuilding, about Marcus's work at the clinic. "So you've always wanted to work with animals?" Ethan asked as they drove through the darkening countryside. Pretty much, I volunteered at a shelter in high school and I don't know, it felt right, like this was what I was supposed to be doing. Marcus glanced over at Ethan. What about you? Have you always wanted to be a rancher? Ethan's expression clouded slightly. Not exactly. I inherited the ranch from my uncle about 2 years ago. He raised me after my parents died when I was 8. He was difficult, didn't really believe in showing affection or emotion, but he left me the ranch in his will, so here I am. I'm sorry about your parents and your uncle. Thanks, it was a long time ago, and honestly, the ranch is growing on me. It's quiet, peaceful. After years of, he stopped abruptly as if catching himself before revealing too much. After years of what? Marcus prompted gently. Ethan was silent for a moment, his hands tight on the steering wheel. Then, I lived in Portland for a while after I aged out of my uncle's house, tried to make it in the city. It didn't work out. I was not in a great place, did some things I'm not proud of. When my uncle got sick and left me the ranch, it felt like a second chance, a way to start over. Marcus heard the weight in those words, the carefully edited history. He wanted to ask more, to understand this man beside him better, but he also recognized the vulnerability it had taken for Ethan to share even that much. I think we all deserve second chances, Marcus said quietly. Ethan glanced at him, surprise flickering across his face, followed by something that looked like gratitude. Yeah, I think so too. The restaurant Ethan had chosen was a small roadside place called the Timber Lodge, all rough wood and warm lighting. They were seated at a corner booth that felt private despite the handful of other diners, and a waitress with kind eyes brought them menus and water. This place doesn't look like much, Ethan admitted, but they make the best burger you'll ever have, and their pie is dangerous. Dangerous how? You'll want to eat the whole thing, fair warning. Marcus grinned, challenge accepted. They ordered burgers for both of them with a promise to split a slice of apple pie for dessert, and fell into conversation that flowed more naturally than Marcus could have hoped. They talked about everything and nothing: favorite movies, childhood pets, places they wanted to travel. Ethan admitted he'd never been outside the Pacific Northwest. Marcus confessed he once wanted to be a marine biologist until he realized it would mean living near the ocean, and he got terribly seasick. That seems like an important thing to figure out before becoming a marine biologist, Ethan said, laughing. You'd think I was 17 and romantic. I thought I could overcome it through sheer determination. And could you? I threw up off a dock in Astoria and decided veterinary medicine was a better fit. Ethan's laugh was rich and genuine, and Marcus found himself wanting to hear it again and again. There was something about this man, his quiet intensity, the careful way he chose his words, the way his whole face transformed when he smiled, that drew Marcus in like gravity. Can I ask you something? Ethan said after their waitress had cleared their plates and brought the promised pie. Sure. Why did you do it, really? Run into the barn, I mean. Ethan's gaze was steady, searching. You could have died, for a dog you didn't know, for someone you barely knew. Why? Marcus considered the question seriously. He'd been asking himself the same thing for the past few days. Honestly, I don't know that I had a reason, I just couldn't not do it. I saw you there, desperate, and I saw a chance to help, and I didn't think, I just moved. Ethan shook his head, something like wonder in his expression. That's incredible, most people wouldn't have done that. I think most people would surprise themselves in a crisis. Maybe, but you didn't just surprise yourself, you were. He paused, seeming to struggle for words. You were amazing, you are amazing. The sincerity in Ethan's voice made Marcus's breath catch. Across the table, in the warm glow of the restaurant lighting, Ethan Morrison was looking at him like he was something precious, something worth saving. I'm just a vet tech who made a split-second decision, Marcus said, trying to deflect. No, Ethan said firmly, you're more than that, and He took a breath, his hands fidgeting with his napkin. I need you to know something. Tonight, this isn't just about thanking you. I mean, I am grateful more than I can express, but that's not why I asked you to dinner. Marcus's heart was pounding. Why did you ask me? Because I wanted to spend time with you, because I haven't been able to stop thinking about you since that night, because when I saw you in the hospital looking at me like I mattered. Ethan's voice dropped to something barely above a whisper. I haven't felt that in a long time, mattering to someone. The confession hung between them, fragile and honest. Marcus felt something in his chest crack open, something that had been carefully guarded for longer than he cared to admit. "You matter," Marcus said, and was surprised by how steady his voice was, how certain. "And I haven't stopped thinking about you either." Ethan's expression shifted, relief, hope, something that looked dangerously like joy. "Yeah. Yeah." They stayed at the restaurant until closing, talking until the staff began pointedly stacking chairs. On the drive back to Millbrook Valley, Ethan's hand found Marcus's across the center console, their fingers intertwining in a way that felt both thrilling and utterly natural. When they pulled up in front of Marcus's apartment, neither of them moved to unbuckle their seatbelts. "I had a really good time tonight," Marcus said. "Me too." Ethan turned to face him fully. "Can I see you again, and not because of near-death experiences or medical emergencies, just because I want to?" "I'd like that." "Tomorrow?" Ethan asked, then immediately looked embarrassed. "Sorry, is that too soon? I don't want to seem desperate or—" "Tomorrow's perfect," Marcus interrupted, smiling. The relief on Ethan's face was endearing. "Okay, good, I'll call you." "Please do." They sat there for another moment, the cab of the truck filled with a charged silence. Marcus found himself leaning in slightly, drawn by the warmth in Ethan's eyes, by the way his gaze dropped to Marcus's lips for just a fraction of a second. But then Ethan pulled back just slightly, offering an apologetic smile. "I should let you get some rest, your shoulders." "Right, yeah," Marcus tried not to feel disappointed. It was their first date, there was no rush. But as he climbed out of the truck and headed toward his apartment door, he heard Ethan call his name. He turned back to find Ethan leaning out the window, his expression soft in the streetlight. "Marcus, thank you for tonight, for everything." "Anytime," Marcus said, and meant it with his whole heart. He watched Ethan's truck disappear down the street before finally going inside, his hand still tingling from where Ethan had held it, his mind already counting down the hours until tomorrow. Marcus woke to sunlight streaming through his bedroom window and his phone buzzing on the nightstand. He fumbled for it, still half asleep, and squinted at the screen. A text from Ethan sent just 10 minutes ago. "Good morning. Hope I didn't wake you. Want to come out to the ranch today? I'd like to show you around. Plus Jasper's been asking about you." Marcus smiled, warmth spreading through his chest. He typed back, "Dogs can't ask questions." The response was immediate. "This one can. He's very articulate." "So is that a yes?" "What time?" "Whenever you want. I'm up. I'll make breakfast." Marcus glanced at his clock. It was barely 8 a.m. on a Sunday, his one day off from the clinic. He should probably sleep in, take it easy, let his body continue healing. Instead, he found himself typing, "Give me an hour." "Perfect, see you soon." Marcus showered quickly, wincing less this time as the water hit his shoulders. The burns were definitely healing, the tight, painful sensation easing into something more manageable. He dressed in jeans and a comfortable t-shirt, then spent an embarrassing amount of time trying to tame his hair before giving up and accepting that it was going to do whatever it wanted. The drive out to the Morrison Ranch took about 15 minutes, following the same route he'd driven that fateful night. In daylight, the property was beautiful: rolling hills, split-rail fencing, and a sprawling oak tree that must have been 100 years old. The main house was a modest single-story ranch home with a wraparound porch, painted white with green shutters. Behind it, Marcus could see the stables and several outbuildings. And the ruins of the barn, still visible as a blackened skeleton against the morning sky. Ethan was sitting on the porch steps, Jasper lying beside him in a puddle of golden fur and sunshine. When he saw Marcus's truck approach, he stood, raising a hand in greeting. Jasper's tail immediately began thumping against the porch boards. "Hey," Ethan said as Marcus climbed out, "how are your shoulders?" "Better every day. How's the patient?" In answer, Jasper bounded down the steps and immediately pressed himself against Marcus's legs, tail wagging so hard his entire back end swayed with the motion. Marcus laughed, crouching down to ruffle the dog's ears. "Hey buddy, good to see you too. You feeling better?" Jasper responded by licking every available inch of Marcus's face, making Ethan laugh from the porch. "I think that's a yes. He's been back to his normal self for a couple days now, no lingering effects from the smoke, thank God." Marcus gave Jasper a final pat and stood, wiping dog drool off his chin. "He looks great." "Come on," Ethan said, gesturing toward the house. I promised you breakfast. The interior of the house was clean but sparse, with the kind of minimal decoration that suggested a single man who spent most of his time outdoors. The living room had a worn leather couch, a coffee table covered in ranching magazines, and a bookshelf packed with an eclectic mix of westerns, fantasy novels, and what looked like psychology textbooks. The kitchen was small but functional, and whatever Ethan was cooking smelled incredible. I hope you like eggs, Ethan said, moving to the stove where a pan was already sizzling. And bacon and toast. I wasn't sure what you'd want, so I made everything. Everything sounds perfect. They ate on the back porch, which overlooked the property with a view that took Marcus's breath away. The valley stretched out before them, green and gold in the morning light, with mountains rising in the distance like sentinels. This is beautiful, Marcus said around a mouthful of what was objectively the best scrambled eggs he'd ever eaten. How long have you lived here? 2 years since my uncle passed, but I visited as a kid every summer. Those were, Ethan paused, his fork stilling on his plate. Those were the good times before everything got complicated. You don't talk about your past much, Marcus observed gently. No, Ethan admitted, I don't, not because I don't want to share with you, just, it's not pretty, and I'm still working through a lot of it. You don't owe me your whole story, Marcus said, not unless you want to share it. Ethan looked at him, something soft and surprised in his expression. Most people want all the details. I'm not most people. No, Ethan said quietly, his gaze holding Marcus's. You're really not. After breakfast, Ethan gave Marcus the grand tour. They walked the property with Jasper trotting alongside, Ethan pointing out various features: the pasture where he kept his small herd of cattle, the chicken coop he'd built himself, the vegetable garden that was his uncle's pride and joy and that Ethan had been struggling to maintain. I'm not much of a gardener, he admitted, looking at the somewhat overgrown plot. Uncle Thomas could grow anything. Me, I killed a cactus once. Marcus laughed. That takes dedication to plant negligence. I'm aware, I'm working on it. They saved the barn ruins for last. Standing in front of the blackened remains in daylight was surreal. Marcus could see exactly where he'd entered, where the loft had been, where the beam had fallen. It looked smaller than it had felt in the moment, less like an inferno and more like a tragedy that had been contained. Insurance is covering the rebuild, Ethan said, shoving his hands in his pockets. Contractors say they can start in a couple weeks. It'll be done by spring. That's good. Yeah, Ethan kicked at a piece of charred wood. You know what's strange? I hated this barn. It was old and drafty and the roof leaked. I'd been planning to tear it down eventually and build something better, but now that it's gone, he trailed off, shaking his head. Now you miss it. Something like that, or maybe I just miss what it represented. This place, this ranch, it's supposed to be my fresh start, my chance to be someone better than who I was, and I almost lost it all because I was too stubborn and broke to fix the wiring. Marcus heard the self-recrimination in Ethan's voice and stepped closer, close enough that their shoulders almost touched. You saved the horses, you tried to save Jasper, you didn't give up even when the smart thing would have been to let it burn. Neither did you. Then I guess we're both stubborn idiots. That surprised a laugh out of Ethan, some of the tension leaving his shoulders. He turned to face Marcus fully, and they were standing close enough now that Marcus could see the flecks of gold in his green eyes, could count the faint freckles across his nose. Marcus, Ethan said softly, can I ask you something? Sure. Is this? He fumbled for words, frustration crossing his face. I'm not good at this, at dating, at being vulnerable. I spent a lot of years being someone I'm not proud of, hiding who I really was, and now I'm here trying to be honest, trying to be better, but I don't know how to. Ethan, Marcus interrupted gently, are you trying to ask if I'm interested in you? Ethan nodded, looking almost embarrassed. I am, Marcus said simply, very much. Last night was one of the best dates I've had in years, maybe ever, and standing here with you now I'm still interested, more interested actually. Even though I'm a disaster. You're not a disaster, you're someone who's been through things and is trying to build something better. That's not a disaster, that's courage. Ethan's expression did something complicated, relief and disbelief and hope all tangled together. I don't deserve you. How about you let me decide what I deserve? They stood there in the ruins of the barn, the morning sun warm on their faces, and something shifted between them. Some unspoken agreement, some acknowledgement that this, whatever this was becoming, was real and worth pursuing. "Come on," Ethan said eventually, his voice slightly rough. "Let me show you the horses, they're a lot prettier than this mess." The stables were indeed beautiful, and the horses, 3 of them, were magnificent. Ethan introduced Marcus to each one: Dakota, a massive bay gelding with a gentle disposition; Sierra, a gray mare who immediately tried to steal Marcus's hat; and Copper, a young chestnut who Ethan had only recently started training. Marcus had limited experience with horses, but Ethan was a patient teacher, showing him how to approach them, how to read their body language. At one point, while Marcus was attempting to pet Sierra without losing his hat, Ethan stepped close behind him, his hand covering Marcus's on the mare's neck, guiding the motion. "Like this," Ethan murmured, his breath warm against Marcus's ear. "Firm but gentle, let her know you're confident." Marcus was pretty sure he was the opposite of confident in that moment, hyper-aware of Ethan's proximity, of the solid warmth of his chest against Marcus's back, of the way his heart was racing in a way that had nothing to do with horses. "Got it?" Ethan asked, and Marcus could hear the smile in his voice, could sense that Ethan knew exactly what effect he was having. "Yeah," Marcus managed, "got it." When Ethan stepped back, Marcus felt the loss of that warmth like a physical thing. They spent the rest of the morning together, falling into an easy rhythm. Ethan had chores to do, feeding the cattle, checking the fences, mucking out the stables, and Marcus found himself helping without being asked, drawn into the comfortable routine of ranch work. It was different from his job at the clinic, more physical and outdoors, but there was something satisfying about it, something grounding. Around noon, they took a break, sitting on the tailgate of Ethan's truck with sandwiches and cold beer, watching the clouds drift across the valley. "I could get used to this," Marcus said without thinking, then immediately worried he'd said too much, moved too fast. But Ethan just smiled, that slow, warm smile that made Marcus's stomach flip. "Yeah, me too." By Monday morning, all of Millbrook Valley knew that Marcus Chen and Ethan Morrison were, in the words of the town's most dedicated gossip, Mrs. Henderson, definitely a thing. Marcus discovered this when he arrived at the clinic to find Lee already waiting for him, practically vibrating with excitement. "Spill," she demanded before he'd even unlocked the door. "I want every single detail, and don't leave anything out." "Don't you have work?" Marcus asked, fumbling with his keys. "I called in sick, this is more important." "Marcus, you spent all day Sunday at his ranch. Mrs. Henderson saw your truck there when she drove past to visit her sister. The whole town is talking about it." Marcus groaned. This was the downside of small-town life. Privacy was essentially non-existent. It was just breakfast, and a tour of the property, and lunch, and maybe dinner. Lee's eyes widened. "You spent the entire day with him." "We were just hanging out." "Marcus Chen, you don't just hang out with someone for 12 hours unless you're extremely into them. So, are you into him?" Marcus thought about the way Ethan had laughed at his terrible jokes, the way his face softened when he talked about his horses, the way his hand had felt covering Marcus's at the stables, the way they'd said goodbye on the porch as the sun was setting, standing close enough to kiss but not quite closing that distance, both of them seeming to savor the anticipation. "Yeah," Marcus admitted, "I'm into him." Lee squealed, actually squealed, and pulled him into a hug that made his shoulders protest. "I'm so happy for you, you deserve this, you deserve someone who looks at you the way he looked at you in the hospital." "How did he look at me?" "Like you hung the moon, like you were the most incredible thing he'd ever seen." Lee pulled back, her expression turning serious. "Just be careful, okay? I know you fall hard and fast, and we don't know much about Ethan Morrison. He's been pretty closed off since he moved here." "I know," Marcus said, "and I'm being careful, we're taking things slow." "Slow is good, slow is smart." Lee checked her phone. "Okay, I actually do need to get to the library, but I want updates, regular updates, got it?" "Got it." After she left, Marcus tried to focus on work, but his mind kept drifting. He'd texted Ethan that morning, just a simple "good morning, hope you slept well," and had received back a picture of Jasper sprawled dramatically across Ethan's bed with the caption, "He misses you already." Marcus had saved the photo immediately. The day passed in a blur of appointments, vaccinations, checkups, one emergency involving a cat who'd eaten something he shouldn't have. Dr. Sullivan raised an eyebrow at Marcus's distracted state but said nothing, just smiled in that knowing way of hers. It wasn't until his lunch break that Marcus's phone rang with an unfamiliar number. He almost didn't answer, assuming it was spam, but something made him pick up. Hello. Marcus Chen, the voice was male, professional, unfamiliar. Yes. This is Detective Brian Walsh with the Oregon State Police. I'm investigating a series of arsons in the region, and I understand you were present at a barn fire last week at the Morrison property. Marcus's stomach dropped. Arson, the fire marshal said it was electrical. The initial report indicated that yes, but we've had 3 similar fires in the past 2 months, all at rural properties, all initially ruled accidental. We're taking a second look. Papers rustled on the other end of the line. I'd like to ask you a few questions about what you saw that night if you have time. Of course, but I don't know that I saw anything unusual. I just drove past, saw the fire and stopped to help. That's fine, any detail could be helpful. Can you walk me through exactly what happened from the moment you first noticed the barn? Marcus did his best to recount the events, the smell of smoke, seeing Ethan near the barn, hearing about Jasper running inside. Detective Walsh listened quietly, occasionally asking clarifying questions about timing, about whether he'd seen anyone else in the area, about whether he'd noticed anything that seemed off. And Mr. Morrison, the detective said, how did he seem to you? Upset, calm. Upset, Marcus said immediately. He was desperate, his dog was trapped. Why are you asking about Ethan? Just routine questions, we're looking at everyone connected to these incidents. A pause. You've spent time with Mr. Morrison since the fire, is that correct? Marcus felt a chill run down his spine. What does that have to do with anything? Probably nothing, like I said, we're just being thorough. Thank you for your time, Mr. Chen. If you think of anything else, please give me a call. He rattled off a phone number that Marcus didn't bother writing down. After he hung up, Marcus sat in his truck in the clinic parking lot, his lunch forgotten, staring at his phone. Arson. The detective had been carefully neutral, but Marcus had heard the subtext. They were looking at Ethan, questioning whether the fire had been deliberately set. Which was insane. Marcus had been there, he'd seen Ethan's face, his genuine terror and desperation. No one was that good an actor. He should call Ethan, warn him that the police were asking questions. But what if the detective had already spoken to him? What if bringing it up would make things awkward? Marcus was saved from his spiral of overthinking by Dr. Sullivan tapping on his truck window. You okay? She asked when he rolled it down. You look like you've seen a ghost. The police called, they're investigating the barn fire, they think it might have been arson. Dr. Sullivan's eyebrows rose. Arson, that's unexpected. They were asking questions about Ethan, like he might be a suspect. Marcus, Dr. Sullivan said gently, you barely know him, are you sure? He didn't do it, Marcus said firmly. I was there, I saw him. No one who was actually guilty would have run back into that barn after me. Unless they were trying to look innocent. You don't believe that? Dr. Sullivan sighed. No, I don't, but I'm worried about you. This is all happening very fast, the fire, the rescue, this new relationship. Just be careful, protect your heart. I will, Marcus promised, though he wasn't sure he believed himself. That evening Ethan texted, weird day, wanna talk? Marcus called immediately, did the police contact you? You too, huh? Ethan's voice was tired, strained. Detective Walsh spent an hour asking me questions about my finances, about my insurance policy, about whether I'd had any disagreements with neighbors. Marcus, they think I burned down my own barn. That's ridiculous. Is it? Ethan laughed, but there was no humor in it. I'm broke. The ranch is barely making money, the insurance payout will cover rebuilding and then some. From an outside perspective, I look guilty as hell. But you're not. No, I'm not, but I also have a record, Marcus, from when I lived in Portland. I did some stupid things, got in with the wrong people. Possession charges, theft, I served 6 months. I thought I'd left all that behind, but apparently the past doesn't just disappear. Marcus felt like the ground had shifted beneath him. Ethan had a criminal record, had been in jail. This was the complicated past he'd alluded to, the things he wasn't proud of. Marcus, you still there? Yeah, I'm here, Marcus took a breath. I don't care about your past, everyone makes mistakes, what matters is who you are now. That's very generous of you. It's not generous, it's true. Marcus paced his living room, Jasper's photo still pulled up on his phone. Ethan, I was there, I saw you, I know you didn't do this. Thank you, Ethan said quietly, and Marcus could hear the emotion in his voice. That means more than you know, I'm worried this is going to affect you. People will talk, they probably already are. If you want to distance yourself, I'd understand. I don't want to distance myself. You might change your mind once you really think about it. A guy with a record under investigation for arson who's basically broke and living alone on a failing ranch, I'm not exactly a catch. You ran back into a burning building after me, Marcus said. You risk your life for the people and animals you care about. You're trying to build something better for yourself. That sounds like a catch to me. Ethan was quiet for a long moment. Then, can I see you tonight? I know it's late, but I could really use. I'll be there in 20 minutes. Marcus grabbed his keys and was out the door before Ethan could protest. Chapter 7, Past and Present. The ranch looked different at night, shadows long and deep across the property, the stars impossibly bright in the absence of city lights. Ethan was waiting on the porch, backlit by the warm glow from the house, and Marcus felt something in his chest tighten at the sight of him. Hey, Ethan said as Marcus climbed the steps. Thanks for coming. Of course. They went inside and Ethan gestured to the couch. Want something to drink, beer, water, something stronger? Water's fine. Ethan returned with 2 glasses and sat beside Marcus, close enough that their knees touched. For a moment neither of them spoke, the silence heavy with unsaid things. I should tell you everything, Ethan finally said. About Portland, about who I was. You deserve to know what you're getting into. Only if you want to share it, Marcus said. You don't owe me your entire history. Maybe not, but I want you to hear it from me, not from some background check or town gossip. Ethan set his water down, his hands clasping together. After my uncle took me in when I was 8, I spent 10 years here. He was, not abusive exactly but cold, distant. He believed in hard work and tough love, heavy on the tough. When I was 18 I left, went to Portland thinking I'd find myself, find a community, find people who understood me. Because you're gay, Marcus asked gently. Ethan's eyes widened slightly. How did you? Call it intuition or wishful thinking. A small smile crossed Ethan's face. Yeah, because I'm gay. My uncle never said it outright, but he made it clear that wasn't acceptable in his house. So I left, found Portland's queer scene, and thought I'd finally found where I belonged. But it didn't work out. For a while, it was great. I had friends, went to clubs, felt like I could be myself for the first time, but I was young and stupid and didn't have any real skills. I couldn't hold down a job, money was always tight, and then I met Derek. The way Ethan said the name, with a mixture of bitterness and residual pain, told Marcus everything he needed to know about that relationship. Derek was charismatic, magnetic, he seemed so confident, so sure of himself, and he paid attention to me, which was intoxicating. I didn't see the red flags, the controlling behavior, the way he isolated me from my friends, the drug use. Ethan. I'm not making excuses, Ethan said quickly. I made my own choices. Derek introduced me to harder stuff. I'm talking about drugs and I went along with it. I told myself I was just experimenting, just having fun, but it became more than that. And when you're using, you need money. Derek had a solution for that too. The theft charges, Marcus said quietly. Ethan nodded. We stole mostly from stores, sometimes from people, petty stuff but enough. We got caught eventually. Derek had priors, so he got 2 years. I got 6 months in probation. Those 6 months were, he exhaled shakily. They were hell, but they were also what I needed, scared me straight literally. I got clean, stayed clean. When I got out, Derek tried to get in touch, but I blocked him, cut ties with everyone from that life. Where did you go? Halfway house at first, then a friend from before, one of the good ones I'd pushed away, let me crash on his couch. I got a job at a warehouse, saved every penny. I was just starting to get my life together when my uncle got sick, cancer. He called me, which was shocking in itself, asked me to come home. And you did. And I did. I spent the last 3 months of his life taking care of him. It was complicated. He never apologized for how he'd treated me, never acknowledged what he'd put me through. But in those last weeks he was softer, more human. He told me about the ranch, about how it had been in the family for generations, how he wanted me to have it, to carry it on. That's when you inherited it. Yeah, he died, left me everything, and suddenly I had this whole property and no idea what to do with it. I thought about selling, but Ethan looked around the room, his expression distant. This place represented a second chance, a way to prove I could be someone different, someone better, so I stayed, learned ranching, tried to make it work. You have made it work, Marcus said firmly. You're building something here. Maybe, or maybe I'm just running from my past. Ethan finally met Marcus's eyes. That's why the arson investigation scares me, not just because I could lose everything I've worked for, but because it feels like my past catching up with me. Like no matter how hard I try to be better, I'll always be that guy who got arrested, who made terrible choices, who hurt people. Marcus reached out, taking Ethan's hand in his. You're not that person anymore. People change, people grow, and the fact that you're still trying, still fighting to build something better, that's not running from your past, that's learning from it. Ethan's fingers tightened around Marcus's. You really believe that? I do, and I believe in you. Marcus shifted closer. Ethan, everyone has things they regret. I'm not going to judge you for who you were when you were young and lost and looking for acceptance. What matters is who you are now, and the person you are now, he's someone worth knowing, worth caring about. Marcus. I mean it, you showed me your worst and I'm still here, I'm still interested. Actually, I'm more interested because now I understand you better. I see your strength, your resilience. That's not something to be ashamed of. Ethan's eyes were bright with emotion. I don't deserve you. Stop saying that, let me decide what I deserve. And then, finally, the space between them disappeared. Marcus wasn't sure who moved first, maybe it was both of them drawn together by gravity and something deeper, but suddenly Ethan's lips were on his, soft and tentative and perfect. The kiss was gentle at first, almost hesitant, as if they were both afraid of breaking the spell. But then Ethan's hand came up to cup Marcus's face, thumb brushing along his cheekbone, and Marcus melted into it, his own hands finding their way to Ethan's shoulders, careful of his healing burns. When they finally pulled apart, both breathing hard, Ethan rested his forehead against Marcus's. I've wanted to do that since the hospital, he admitted. Yes. Yeah, you were lying there in that hospital bed looking at me like I was something special, and all I could think was that I wanted to kiss you. But it seemed too soon, too fast. And now it feels exactly right. They kissed again, slower this time, deeper. Marcus lost track of time, lost track of everything except the warmth of Ethan's mouth, the solid presence of him, the way his heart was pounding against his ribs like it was trying to escape. When they finally separated, Marcus glanced at the clock on the wall and groaned. It's past midnight, I should probably go work in the morning. Or, Ethan said carefully, you could stay, I mean just to sleep, if you want, no pressure. Marcus smiled, I'd like that. They got ready for bed in comfortable silence, Ethan lending Marcus a t-shirt and sweatpants that were too big but soft and worn. The bedroom was simple. A large bed with a sturdy wooden frame, more of those psychology textbooks stacked on the nightstand, and a window that looked out over the valley. Jasper, who'd been sleeping on a dog bed in the corner, immediately jumped up onto the bed when they climbed in, wedging himself between them with a contented sigh. Sorry, Ethan said, laughing. He's used to having the bed to himself. I don't mind. They lay there in the darkness, Jasper a warm, furry barrier between them, and talked in quiet voices about nothing and everything. Marcus told Ethan about his family, his parents who'd emigrated from Taiwan before he was born, his younger sister who was a lawyer in Seattle, his grandmother who still sent him care packages of homemade dumplings despite the fact that he was 30 years old. Ethan talked about his dreams for the ranch, sustainable practices, maybe starting a program to rescue and rehabilitate horses, growing the cattle herd. He talked about his love of reading, how he discovered fantasy novels in prison and they'd become his escape, how he was slowly teaching himself to cook beyond basic survival meals. What's your favorite book? Marcus asked, half asleep now, lulled by the warmth of the bed and the sound of Ethan's voice. The Name of the Wind by Patrick Rothfuss. It's about a guy trying to reinvent himself, trying to become someone legendary despite his humble origins. I related to that, the wanting to be more than your circumstances. You are more than your circumstances. I'm working on believing that. Marcus reached across Jasper to find Ethan's hand, their fingers intertwining. I'll keep reminding you until you do. Deal. They fell asleep like that, hands clasped over a golden retriever, the stars bright outside the window, and for the first time in longer than either of them could remember, they both felt something that had been missing from their lives: hope. The investigation into the barn fire intensified over the next 2 weeks. Detective Walsh became a regular presence around Millbrook Valley, interviewing neighbors, examining records, asking questions that made people uncomfortable. And through it all, Ethan remained the primary suspect, his past hanging over him like a storm cloud. Marcus watched Ethan struggle with it, saw the way the stress wore on him. The easy smiles became rarer. The shadows under his eyes deepened, but Ethan kept working, kept pushing forward, refusing to let the investigation break him. Marcus did what he could to support him. They fell into a routine. Marcus would go to the ranch after work most days, help with chores, make dinner, just be present. Some nights he stayed over and they'd lie in bed talking until they fell asleep, navigating the newness of their relationship while also dealing with the weight of the investigation. They hadn't told many people they were officially together, but in a town the size of Millbrook Valley, secrets were impossible to keep. Mrs. Henderson had apparently spread the word after seeing Marcus's truck at the ranch multiple times, and now everyone knew. The reactions were mixed. Some people were supportive, others disapproving, and a few openly hostile, muttering about how Marcus was getting involved with a criminal, a suspect, someone who was clearly bad news. Lee remained staunchly in their corner, defending them at the library when gossip got particularly vicious. Dr. Sullivan was more reserved but kind, reminding Marcus to take care of himself even while he was taking care of Ethan. "You're running yourself ragged," she observed one afternoon when Marcus nearly fell asleep during a routine checkup. "When's the last time you had a full night's sleep in your own bed?" "I sleep at Ethan's." "That's not what I meant, and you know it. Marcus, I'm not saying what you're doing isn't noble, but you need to remember that you can't pour from an empty cup. You're still healing from your own injuries, and now you're taking on his emotional burden too." "He needs me." "I'm sure he does, but do you need you?" She patted his shoulder gently. "Just think about it." Marcus did think about it, but he couldn't bring himself to pull back. Every time he considered spending a night at his own apartment, he'd get a text from Ethan, sometimes just a picture of Jasper, sometimes a simple "thinking about you," and he'd find himself driving out to the ranch instead. He was falling in love. He knew that, could feel it happening with every shared meal, every quiet conversation, every kiss goodnight. It terrified him. He barely knew Ethan, really. They'd been dating for less than a month, but his heart didn't seem to care about timelines or logic or the sensible voice in his head that sounded suspiciously like Lee warning him to slow down. 3 weeks after the fire, everything changed. Marcus was at the clinic when Ethan called, his voice tight with barely controlled panic. "They found something," he said without preamble. "At one of the other fire sites, accelerant traces that match chemicals from my property. Marcus, they're talking about arresting me." Marcus's stomach dropped. "That's impossible, you didn't do this." "I know that, you know that, but the evidence." "What chemicals?" "Gasoline and some kind of solvent. They found containers of it in my shed, which makes sense because I use them for equipment maintenance, but the detective is making it sound like I had a whole arson kit." "Have you called a lawyer?" "I can't afford a lawyer. I can barely afford to keep this ranch running." "Ethan, you need legal representation. This is serious." "I know it's serious, Ethan.